Emulation has always been a spicy topic in the video game industry, and a lot of projects I've seen from some fans lately have been really killing it. It seems like every single month I hear about a new project or update that blows my mind, and I love to see what dedicated fans are capable of. However, it still seems to be quite a gray area. Some people think it should be the Wild West and everyone can share and play their games for free with no laws. And others won't even touch emulation and are addicted to the curves of their special, very special GameCube controller. But today I wanted to talk about the good, the bad, and the downright deplorable when it comes to emulation. And recently in my last video on emulation, I was outed as a Nintendo ninja, but I regret to inform you that only one part of that statement is true because I have never worked for Nintendo. Anyways, it's a rough world out there, kiddos, but let's get to the rest of the video. So of course, let's start off with the good. I like starting off positive. So I've been emulating for a long time, and I'm kind of an expert at doing illegal shit. I even remember the very first time I popped the old cherry and I was emulating Pokemon Emerald on my Galaxy 2 S phone in school. Immediately, I was hooked into the convenience. I could play Pokemon at school with no one thinking I was a weirdo antisocial freak playing a Game Boy in math class. Well, the antisocial part was still least true. No one was questioning my freak. I feel like I had so much power in the palm of my hands with features like fast forward and save states. These allow you to bend the game in question to your will and break down difficult areas of a game to much more manageable slices. And these features, albeit used in moderation, are excellent tools to have. Now, even with features like Rewind to further nullify bullshit RNG in older games, or go back to text you might have skipped over while fast forwarding. And these are all really nice, but personally I think the biggest things emulation has going for it are video game preservation and community. There are very few things that excite me more than hearing about a brand new project that a community has finished that just unshackles a whole new library of old games. And things like ROM hacks and randomizers have been around for almost as long as emulation. I can think of several examples where someone started making a ROM hack and that eventually led into the game development for a full-ass game. And these kind of projects bring a whole new life into a community and also get people into game development, and what could possibly be bad about that? Especially for those of us who just want more of the same. I don't know about you, but I know around the time I learned that Pokemon ROM hacks existed, I played nearly half a dozen or so off the bat. I think my personal favorite though of a cool emulation project that I've seen recently is something like the Virtual Boy on the 3DS. This is personally a great option for someone like myself who's only liked making fun of the Virtual Boy's failure and never attempted to even buy or play the games. And it's also something I kind of doubt Nintendo would ever go back and do themselves, so it's nice to at least get a better glimpse of what these games are like. And this is something that just would not have been possible without the wonderful community backing up and supporting these projects. These are of course the good parts and the First Amendment lovers' wet dreams of absolute freedom. But like I mentioned earlier, there can be some darker sides to this community. Cue the Lavendar Town music. Over the years, the community of dedicated fans has been doing a wonderful job preserving the classics. And this is really important because frankly, if you've been following the industry and news stories, not everyone sees this the same way. Because no matter how much copium we spread around when it comes to the topic, and while emulators might be considered legal if done right, things like ROMs or copies of games spread on the internet is definitely a big no-no. And recently, companies have been doing anything they can to stop the spread. Just look at how many people and groups Nintendo has gone after in the past couple of years for distributing ROMs or affecting their sales. And while this does kind of bring us into the bad, I did want to go back out just quickly, back into the light of the good, because no matter what, it's really hard to convince me and others that preserving ROMs on the internet is bad. We as fans care about these games sometimes seemingly more than the actual rights holders themselves. And I would never want to live in a world where I can't play Pokemon Emerald, a game stuck on the GBA, or Mortal Kombat GBA, a game that probably deserves to get stuck on the Game Boy Advance. But the sentiment I see for a lot of these is, well, if you're not going to release a 20-year-old game easily for me to play, and I want to play it, what are my options? Spend $200 or emulate it, and legally Nintendo might have an argument, but I mean, I think any true lover of video games would just say, hey, emulate that game. It's dope, you should try it. These games might be harder to come by, but I just don't want to lose gaming history. Which is just another really scary thing to think about. How many games have we just lost over the years? The World Wide Web itself was invented in 1989, before yours truly was even born, and also before it was easy to archive and spread games to a wider audience, and also just frankly in the midst of when video games were booming. And far away were the days of internet databases with terabytes of ROM. People were still spreading around games with floppy disks and shit. And I often wonder how many games have just been lost to history. How many games were just some small project from a group of friends that maybe spread in the area but just never found its way onto the internet. And how many weird 90s hentai games have we really lost? Personally, I do not want to go back to a world like that, where we have no control or say over preserving our favorite games. It's also why even with massive libraries of ROMs existing on the internet, I am still interested in finding copies of my favorite games to keep physically. In the current landscape, it's one of the only ways I can truly feel confident that I'll be able to play my favorites for years to come, especially if someone like Nintendo decides to crack down even harder on these fan preservation projects. And while I'm talking about this sad topic of losing our favorites, time to bring the mood down a little bit more with some of the deplorable acts of those in this space. While many of us do see this as a space to preserve our favorite video games and relive the glory days of our childhood, some seek profit and to tarnish the name of this wholesome community. And worse, eventually these acts can lead to openings for big companies and IP holders to take action in the space, and sometimes rightfully so. And the more this happens, the more bold I think IP giants in the video game industry will get in taking down other projects with less nefarious intents. For example, in 2021, it's a pretty famous example, the site ROM Universe was sued by Nintendo for $2.1 million in damages, as the creators of the site were trying to create a premium Netflix-style subscription service on their website. Now, maybe nefarious is a little bit intense, but at the very least, this was just dumb. And for any of you thinking, wait, I can do this and not get caught, just don't do this. I mean, granted, many of us are either too smart or too dumb to be capable of doing something like this, such as myself. I don't even know how to make a website. But it's stories like this I just hate to hear about, because really, I think the majority of us here just want to have fun. And I personally think this just opens the floodgates for companies like Nintendo and PlayStation to go after other projects, as they've already done in recent years. But stuff like this, it's just not making any of us look good, because the outsiders, they don't see the line in the sand between the fans and those trying to take advantage of the current situation, and it's just relative freedom. Okay, but where does that leave us in the future? Well, right now, despite this doom and gloom, the emulation industry or fan base has us freaks booming with excitement. There are so many fun new projects, new hacks, new ways to play old games in a fresh way, but I do see a change for the current generation of games that I don't really know how moving forward it will all look. So even in 10 years, if we do live in an ideal state where all the past gens have been preserved, what about the PS5? Things like console exclusives really seem to be dying a bit, especially with PlayStation, Xbox, where most modern games naturally find their way on PC, where preservation is just a little bit easier. I don't even know if people have the desire to emulate Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on PS5 long after it's being supported, where it's most likely going to have a port at some point on PC. I mean, maybe some people will, but who knows? Also, imagining running like something like Final Fantasy Rebirth on an iPhone 18 or something is just absolutely wild. But then you also have cases like Bloodborne, a game that seems stuck on the PS4. We really can only hope that one day we'll get a port or a remake, but a fully functional PS4 emulator would be really, really nice right now. So there's good and there's bad with emulation. What's really the best way forward? How do us as fans ensure that all of our favorite games are available and not run the risk of having our hard drives yeeted by Nintendo ninjas? Well, there's one trend that's really promising that's kind of a little lackluster, but that's when game companies legally sell us emulators or emulated versions of their games for us to play. Think of things like NSO or PlayStation Premium or something like those Capcom collections. That last one in particular is actually one of my favorites. When a company goes back to their old catalog to figure out all the rights and give us a massive long-awaited collection of games, sometimes with added features like new modes or goodies packed in size and extra bonuses. And of course, when there's a physical copy of that, that's just even better. These collections, while sometimes cost a bit, are an excellent way to feel worry-free about playing your favorites while also contributing to our modern capitalist society. And if you're a Pokemon fan, which you probably are if you found this channel, I can imagine a Pokemon Game Boy or Game Boy Advance collection of games similar to this, not only including the original games, but extras, maybe cut content, or even access to the old giveaways. I know I'm living in a fantasy world, but come on guys, I know many of us would eat this up, and unfortunately, Game Freak and Nintendo are just not serving. And even when they do something cool, like translating and releasing Fire Emblem 1 for Switch, they still somehow fumble the bag. It's a timed release, and really without doing the same for Fire Emblem 3, people are still never going to get the full story. And I wonder how poor this game sold, or what is the reason for them not doing this with the other Fire Emblem games, or other games that just need translations that hopefully would be relatively quick to do, as a lot of these game series that were maybe forgotten in the past are selling really well right now with more the modern releases. And in fact, with lots of Nintendo published games, they're really all going into the NSO subscription route. And with the mention of NSO, all right, I'm going to take you to Hot Take City and I'll hop on board, and some of you I know will be hooting and hollering in the back, and others will be begging for my demise. So here it is. While I think things like NSO and PS Premium do give us what we want, they kind of suck. Now the concept is cool, right? Pay for money to get access to your old games and online features. Sounds cool. You can even play with your pals some online multiplayer, and rarely even have something like Star Fox 2 on the NES being released for everyone, and that's awesome. The problem is, most of my favorite games aren't even on these services, and some of the best games on those consoles. Just look at the numbers of these released games versus the number on NSO. It's just so pathetic, honestly. Look, I know I'm greedy for wanting more, but come on guys, these collections don't even have the best games on the consoles. It's not the worst thing ever, mind you, but it's definitely not worth a round of applause. Maybe like a round of slow, unenthusiastic snapping. So I don't know, I'm curious what people think about these things in the comments below. I really am leaning towards preferring the old way Nintendo handled this for all their older titles, like on the Wii and Wii U days. I personally buy games like Pokemon Ruby and Super Metroid again on just like every console I can, just so I can just easily play it whenever I want to, without the need for an internet connection. But I don't know, maybe I'm just entitled and talking crazy. Well, that's really all I had to say today, and this is how I see the current state of emulation as a longtime fan of not only emulating games, but also downloading my games for free. I hope it didn't sound too much like a preschooler asking for their parent or something, as if there's no gray area and only right or wrong answers, but I hope you enjoyed. Check out my other videos if you enjoyed it, and also subscribe if you made it this far. It really helps out.